Great.
In progress.
The program already started.
Okay, great. Welcome, everybody. I see we have some people starting to join already. We'll give a minute or so for everyone to just log in and get into place. So if you've joined in already, thanks very much for being on time, and we're really looking forward to today's session. We'll start in about a minute or so. Wano, just put yourself on mute if you're for the moment, please. Okay, thanks very much, everybody. We now have about 130 people online, so we're getting up there to the numbers of those who have registered. We'll take this chance, I think, to get started. So first, a big welcome to everybody who's joined. This is an important pre-COP event and the 23rd of the Energy Transition Roundtable events. We've seen in the registration that we have many old colleagues and friends who are joining again from previous roundtables, and many new ones as well. So we welcome back all the old colleagues who are joining us, and also a big welcome to the new colleagues who are joining our roundtables for the first time. My name is Tarek Kettleson. I'm the Director General of AMPAIRS, which is an Australian and Vietnamese organization that is supporting and working with ANU, our Indonesian and our Philippine partners in organizing these roundtable events. We've got a pretty jam-packed session today, so I'm going to keep my interventions as short as possible to give our speakers and panelists a chance to really use as much of the time as possible. If we can go to the next slide quickly, please. So just a few housekeeping points. We will be recording this event, and we do make the event public, available online for people to watch and to listen to later on. So just a note to everybody that the event is being recorded. We do have interpretation available in English, in Vietnamese, and Bahasa Indonesia as well. So if you want to get to interpretation, it's the same as other Zoom events. You look at your menu at the bottom there. You'll see a button for interpretation that's got a picture of the world. And when you click on that, you can click on your channel that you're of the preferred language of your choice. So please, the whole event will be in the multiple languages. Pick the language you're most comfortable with and join us from there. Quick note on question and answers. We have two ways of asking questions. So there is a Q&A button in the same scroll menu at the bottom. You'll see the Q&A chat box. Click on that chat box and ask questions anytime. So type in questions as they come to you, and we have a team working behind the scenes here to kind of organize those questions and make sure we can ask them as efficiently as possible. We do have an opportunity for a couple of people to ask a live question. So if you have a question that you'd really like to ask in person with your video on, type it into the chat box, but also raise your hand. And then one of our team in the background will switch you from being a participant to a moderator, and that will give you the chance to be able to turn on your video and to ask the question, and they will indicate to you when is the right time to do that. So if you really want to ask your question in person, then please do raise your hand and we'll try to accommodate as many as possible. And the last point, the recording of this plus all the PowerPoint presentations will be shared. So no need to kind of, take screenshots or anything. We'll share everything with everybody so you have a chance to have the full materials. Okay, so quickly, if we switch next slide to the agenda, two main sessions here that we are structuring our event around, and that really speaks to the scope of what we're talking about today. We are halfway between the signing of the Paris Agreement and the 2030 deadline for progress that's enshrined in the Paris Agreement, and it's a good time to take stock. So what we plan is two sessions. The first session will take a look at the energy transition achievements from Southeast Asia in the last 7 years, so since the Paris Agreement, and we'll get a national perspective on all of these from our three focal point countries, Indonesia, Philippines, and Vietnam. And then we'll have a Q&A discussion around that. And then the second session is recognizing that in our second half, in the 7 years to go, we've got to really pick up the pace of energy transition in Southeast Asia and look specifically at the role of regional cooperation to accelerate this energy transition agenda. So that'll be the second panel session that we're talking about. Okay, without further ado, we should, if you switch to the next slide, please. We can now introduce, we have an opening session where we have our two opening session remarks. And first and foremost, let me invite Dr. Tang Nam Do. Dr. Tang is a fellow at the Zero Carbon Energy for Asia Pacific Grand Challenge Program. He's also a fellow at the Crawford School of Public Policy. He's got 25 years of experience in Southeast Asia, even including serving as the Deputy Director General of the International Cooperation Department for Ministry of Environment and Natural Resources in Vietnam, as well as being the operating focal point for Vietnam as the chair of the ASEAN Working Group on Climate Change. So he's extensive experience on the academic side as well as on the government side, and he is currently convener and manager for the UN Southeast Asia Energy Transition Partnership Roundtable Series. So Tang, pass over to you for your opening remarks.
Thank you very much, Tarek. Good day to everyone. I would like to extend a warm welcome to you all for attending today's session. As Tarek mentioned, today's session is the 23rd session out of the 24 sessions under the budget Energy Transition Partnership Roundtables for Southeast Asia, funded by the Energy Transition Partnership. And we are from Australian National University, working closely with MPES and other partners in Vietnam, Indonesia, and the Philippines to implement this project. As Tarek mentioned, the key objective of today's session is to take stock of the progress toward energy transition in Southeast Asia, and more importantly, discuss and map out the ways forward, how to advance regional cooperation, how to boost energy transition in Southeast Asia together. Right? So I would like to emphasize the aspect of working together as the key topic that we will be discussing today. Today we have honor to have our distinguished speakers from Ministry of Energy and Mineral Resources, Indonesia, Energy Policy and Planning Bureau of the Philippines, the University of Technology, Ho Chi Minh City from Vietnam, ASEAN Center for Energy, Clean, Affordable, Secure Energy for Southeast Asia project, CASE by short. Also from Climate Works, Australia. And we have Professor Frank Jutso, professor at the Australian National University, as a keynote speaker as well. So very special session, very interesting topic, great participation. We have received around 300 registers And so far we have about 200 people attending, and likely that we'll have more attending soon. So very exciting moment now, and I don't know what to say more, but I'm sure that we will have a very fruitful and lively session ahead. So thank you and welcome you all to today's session. Now I'd like to hand back to you, Tarek, for another introduction. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Dr. Tang, for those positive words and the guidance there. So we now pass for our second opening remarks, and we're very lucky to have Mr. John Cotton joining us from the ETP Secretariat in Bangkok. So John Cotton is the Senior Program Manager for Southeast Asia Energy Transition Partnership, and he's been based in Southeast Asia for 20 years, so he knows this region pretty well. He's been dedicating his work to renewable energy projects and climate change mitigation efforts. He's worked across a gamut of private sector and public sector roles, ranging from the Chief Administration Officer for the Thai EPC in the transmission and distribution sector, the Managing Director of a Pan-Asia Engineering Consultancy, and then, of course, working for Southeast Asia COP unit at the FCDO with the UK government in the build-up to COP26. So without further ado, John, maybe I pass to you for your opening remarks.
Yeah, thank you very much, Tarek. Thanks for the introduction and for your and your team's work in putting this together. And thank you, Dr. Tang Nam Do, for setting the scene today. It's nice to see you in person, actually. So I'm also a scholar at the University of Sussex, and the amount of contributions you've made, Dr. Do, to the energy transition space in this region is quite phenomenal. I'm often referencing your work, so I thought I'd just take this opportunity to personally thank you for your contributions there. But please just let me start by thanking everybody today for your participation in this event. There's a great turnout, and we have a wide and diverse collection of policymakers and key stakeholders that are relevant to pursuing, ultimately, greenhouse gas reduction from the energy sector. The list of attendees today is too extensive to have introductions to all, but I think it's important that I highlight some of the attendees just so we have a flavour for who's present and with these people, what sort of a conversation we can expect to have today. So Mr. Gigi Udi Admo, it's a pleasure to have you here. We're honoured, the Director for Energy Conservation from MEMI in Indonesia. We have Mr. Michael Sinacruz, Director of Energy Policy and Planning Bureau from the Philippines. We have Mr. Benny Soyadi, the Manager of Power, Fossil Fuel and Alternative Energy and Storage from ASEAN Centre for Energy. Professor Frank Jotso from Crawford School of Public Policy from ANU. Dr. Tan Kang Nam Do, we just mentioned, the fellow from ANU Grand Challenge Programme on Net Zero Carbon Energy for Asia. Of course, we have Mr. Tarek Ketelsen, the Director General of AMPERS. Miss Moketi H. Suyamon, the Executive Director from IRID. Mr. Nguyen Xuan Hui, Associate Professor of the Ho Chi Minh City University of Technology. We have my good friend, Mr. Sasha Opawa, the Project Director for Clean, Affordable and Secure Energy for Southeast Asia, or CASE. Ms. Trang Nguyen, Southeast Asia Lead of Climate Works. Ms. Loan Luong, Energy Transition Partner Manager from AMPERS. And of course, we have Dimas Fauzi, the ETP Regional Coordinator and the ETP team. I mentioned just a few here. To show my gratitude, ETP's gratitude for all of your contributions, and to really highlight the depth of conversation we can have today. So first, please let me introduce ETP. Energy Transition Partnership is a multi-platform, multi-stakeholder partnership which brings together government and philanthropies. The governments of the UK, France, Germany, Canada, Australia, and various philanthropies, including Children's Investment Fund, Sequoia Fund Foundation, and others, came together with the shared ambition of expediting the energy transition in Southeast Asia. So we at ETP are managing a fund of resources which we aim to apply to the governments of Southeast Asia to support them in their own in their climate goals, climate ambitions, and we do this through technical assistance. One such technical assistance is the Energy Transition Roundtable, of which we're part of today, and it's a project that's been implemented by a consortium led by Australian National University and AMPERS, and it aims to build the capacity of the regional stakeholders on various aspects of energy transition. The project has very successfully. I delivered 22 roundtables where all the materials have been made accessible in our website and on YouTube. And I really share this far and wide. The materials that have been delivered are really of the highest standard. And we at ETP, who are perhaps considered experts in this field, we learn something from every roundtable. We learn a lot. So we've really had a great resource library built under this program, and excellent dialogues which support the region in achieving the climate commitments. So today we're talking about pre-COP 28, and there's obviously a lot of focus on COP. So COP meetings they're of the utmost significance because they serve as the forum for international collaboration. COP sets the agenda for climate action, establishing commitments, ensuring accountability, providing financial support, promoting technology transfer, raising public awareness, driving progress towards sustainable low-carbon future. COP is a critical component of the global efforts to address the climate challenge. Whilst the COP process is not perfect, it's iterative, and I've been to many of them. They're getting stronger. It is the best mechanism we have today to convene the global actors and attempt to point our ship in the right direction, to align global efforts to tackle the biggest threat to our planet of this time. So high on the agenda at COP this year, again, will be efforts to keep the 1.5 degree target alive and avoid the disastrous impacts of climate change should we go beyond this marker. There'll be dialogue specific to the energy transition to pursue commitments. This year, I think there'll be a lot of focus on doubling energy efficiency, tripling renewable energy capacity to 11 gigawatts globally, doubling the hydrogen production, and dialogue of how that might happen. So some key topics of discussion that may come out today are, in addition to renewable energy and energy efficiency, we have the tools already at our fingertips to expedite the energy transition, but how to mobilize and utilize the tools in an efficient manner is a challenge, such as carbon pricing, transitioning away from fossil fuels, climate finance, technological innovation, the transfer of such technology to do this, global energy transition partnerships, youth and civil society engagement, and of course, just transition, which is cutting across all of this. So I look forward to hearing the multitude of perspectives that we can gain from the room today. So as we're joined today from such a diverse range of stakeholders across our region, it might be worth starting on an optimistic note. So since taking this job, since the 3 years that ETP has been active, we've seen great steps, great political commitments to pushing the needle on energy transition and reducing our greenhouse gas emissions from the energy sector. Vietnam made its net zero commitments at COP26, and since then has been pushing its policies to align with this target. Its ambition recently reflected in its PDP8 with its 2030 6 gigawatt of wind target, and its national energy master plan targeting up to 20% of renewables by 2030. Its engagement, of course, with the JETP and the active pursuit of the carbon markets. In the Philippines, we've seen a new renewable portfolio standard increase from 1 to 2.5%, lifted of foreign ownership on the restrictions in renewable energy projects. And recently, the Philippines offered through its JAP program 15 gigawatts of renewable energy projects at auction, and is actively pursuing measures to propel its offshore wind sector. In Indonesia, we saw the President Regulation number 112, which aims at accelerating and unlocking the development of RE for the electricity power supply, and significantly progressed its CIPP under the JETP partnership. We also saw strengthening of the energy efficiency policies, and I understand that this year there'll be some significant announcements from the government of Indonesia at COP regarding coal phase down and energy efficiency. So I think we can argue quite strongly that political buy-in is happening. The last 3 years I saw a lot of political buy-in, but the challenges to energy efficiency span the social, economic, financial, technical, environmental, and that's what we're here to discuss, how to unlock and move forward this energy transition. So with that, I encourage today an open and frank discussion. Thank you all once again for joining, and look forward to hearing all the thoughts that can be shared today as we prepare for COP and the challenges in years ahead. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, John, and some inspiring remarks there. And I agree with you. The roundtables, particularly because of the participation, are events where we always learn something. You know, we have some excellent responses from the audience, and some feedback, and I'm always learning every session as well. So I'm looking forward to that this time as well. Okay, so let's get into it. We have there a clear agenda that Dr. Tang and John have put onto the table for us to address, and also a very optimistic set of points about what we've achieved. And I think that's something we should be celebrating. So let's start now with session 1. I'm going to pass over to my co-facilitator, Ms. Ibu Kuki. She's currently the Executive Director of the Indonesia Research Institute for Decarbonization, and also one of its co-founders. Irida, one of our close partners who have been deeply involved in all aspects of our ETP roundtable. So we're really pleased to have her join as a co-facilitator here. She has been working in climate change issues since the early 1990s, and her involvement in the climate negotiations that's the COP process, started in the year 2000 at the COP6 in The Hague. So Ibu Kuki has extensive experience in this COP process that we're trying to think about and influence as we move forward. She's also joined the Office of Indonesia's President's Special Envoy for Climate Change over 2 terms, 2010-2014 and 2015-2019, where she assisted the Presidential Special Envoy in the international climate negotiations, including during the preparation of the Paris Agreement. And then after COP21, she's remained part of Indonesia's Article 6 of the Paris Agreement negotiation team. So you have, with our facilitator here, we're in great hands, somebody who knows the COP process inside out. She knows Indonesia and Southeast Asia's climate change issues inside out. And without further ado, Bu Kuki, I pass to you to facilitate our first session.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Tarek, and good morning, everyone. Greetings from Jakarta. So for the first session, as already mentioned, we have a session that will be talking about key energy transition achievements so far of course, in the region, which is Southeast Asia, and especially since the adoption of the Paris Agreement. And to start this session, we're gonna hear the keynote presentation to be delivered by my very good friend, Professor Frank Jotso, who is a professor of environmental economics and climate change economics at the ANU Crawford School of Public Policy. And there he directs the Center for Climate and Energy Policy. Frank also head of energy with the ANU Institute for Climate, Energy and Disaster Solutions, and director of the ANU Zero Carbon Energy for Asia Pacific Grand Challenge Initiative. In this project, the work that we are in, Frank is our ANU program lead for this project, and he will be, of course, as I mentioned earlier, share with us the keynote speech, and then after that we're gonna have 3 distinguished panelists that will be discussing what happened already in the region. So I think without further ado, I would like to invite Professor Frank Jotso to share his views. And Frank, you have 10 minutes, so please.
Well, thank you very much, Mbak Kuki, and thank you everyone for joining and spending part of your day with us here in this pre-COP briefing. Now, I will share some thoughts and some insights about the international negotiations process. And if you have very specific questions about COP28, then in fact, our dear facilitator, Ibu Kuki, may well be in the best position to answer them, because she's really a very deep expert on the COP process. Now, colleagues, I would like to share my screen, which requires unsharing of the very pleasant background screen that we have on there now. And as soon as that's done, I will get started with my slides. I may start talking in the meantime. Already. Well, thank you very much for that, colleagues. That's excellent. So all I need to do is find my slides, and here they are. And here we go. So key themes at the UN Climate Change Convention negotiations relevant to Southeast Asia. Now, of course, the overarching emphasis is very much on climate change financing, increasingly on adaptation as well as loss and damage. And so it's, of course, a perennial topic, the need for more money to flow towards developing countries for climate action there, both on emissions reductions and importantly on climate change adaptation. And we see really increasing emphasis on adaptation. We've seen at COP27 last year a process towards a global adaptation goal. And of course, we've seen progress towards a framework for a loss and damage fund. Now, these are topics quite separately from what we're discussing in the Energy Transition Partnership in this program. Of course, it's important to note that these are really the big headlines, some of the big headline topics in the COP talks. Importantly, also the topic of international emissions trading and credits, so-called Article 6 topics under the Paris Agreement. Of course, there's a rule book already for that. Important aspects of the rules for international trading of emissions certificates are still being finalized. There's a partial resolution on the internationally transferred mitigation outcomes. So in broad terms, the trading that may occur between countries and that developing countries, of course, could potentially benefit from financially, as well as at COP27, the definition of a so-called mitigation contribution emission reduction, kind of a carbon credit that is meant to be valid for achievement of emissions targets within countries and potentially be useful for trading in voluntary markets. So, for example, when international corporates want to fulfill a net zero commitment by way of emissions credits. And then, of course, at every COP, there are many, many announcements, and that was the case at COP27, and of course will be the case at COP28. Again, countries, governments, major international corporates or philanthropists often choose COP as a platform for giving visibility for their own programs, commitments, and initiatives. And of course, Indonesia's JETP initiative was announced at COP27 last year. A big topic at COP28, and really in many ways the lead topic at COP28 for the high-level aspects of it, is the first global stocktake under the Paris Agreement. And so the stocktake is a process built deeply into the Paris Agreement, aiming to, well, take stock of progress or lack of progress towards the goals of the Paris Agreement. And I've written out some of the key statements in the synthesis report of the first global stocktake, which was released just some weeks ago and which will figure very prominently in the high-level discussions at COP28. So overall assessment is, of course, as the IPCC assessment also has shown, that some action on climate change, so reducing emissions globally, has taken place, but much, much more is needed. And this is, of course, illustrated in the trajectories of global emissions towards 1.5 degrees or compatible with 2 degrees that you can see on the left-hand panel of the slide here. They would imply very strong global emissions reductions in years to come. And you compare that with current trajectories, which is essentially, flatlining or small growth even of global emissions. And you can see the range of nationally determined contributions as they currently stand to 2030. That's the red wedge here in that chart. And that is really way above that range that would be compatible with outcomes for the in line with the Paris Agreement long-term goal of keeping global temperatures well below 2 degrees. So in other words, the world needs to do a lot more. Commitments will need to be strengthened, and the gap between reality and pledges or commitments needs to be closed. Now, key findings on climate change mitigation, in particular energy, in the Global Stocktake report are really things that echo what has been said in most of the meetings in this program to date. So scaling up renewable energy while phasing out all unabated fossil fuels, unabated meaning not sequestering the carbon dioxide that occurs when using fossil fuels, ending deforestation, reducing non-CO2 emissions. On the energy side of things, electrification, energy efficiency and demand-side management, as well as energy storage, in addition to the renewable energy revolution. We need systems transformations in industry, transport, buildings, and other sectors. All of this done in a way so that the transition is kind to local people and workers involved in traditional high-emitting industries by the label of just transitions, and increasingly an emphasis here on economic diversification as well. So all of these statements taken from the Global Stocktake report. Now, at COP28, of course, we're expecting some political decisions about ambition. And of course, all of this has a strong focus on the next round of NDCs, which countries are called on to submit during 2024-2025. Now, what to expect at COP28? Well, I've said most of these things already. Responses to the Global Stocktake, of course. We will see positioning regarding climate change leadership. There's some calls or expectations perhaps for a US-China agreement of some form on climate change. Traditionally, that has always helped when the US and China have managed to be on the same page regarding climate change. That allows many things in the global scene to fall into place. Of course, the EU are continuing to push for the idea of a climate club where countries mutually commit to greater action at home and grant each other preferential status in return. And of course, all of this takes place in the context of really quite strong geopolitical fractures. On energy specifically, we are seeing and will see a push led by the European Union to phase out fossil fuels altogether. And the opposing force to that are many of the fossil fuel producing states, not all of them, but many that push for a role for so-called abated fossil fuels. So fossil fuels with carbon capture and storage, including through energy carriers such as hydrogen. And that's an obvious thing, of course, to take prominence in a COP that is hosted in the Gulf state region. On markets, finance and adaptation, further progress, of course, expected. We're expecting also increasing focus on climate change impacts and adaptation. There's very strong awareness, obviously, that this is by a long margin the hottest year ever recorded so far. And of course, many new initiatives will be announced. What does all of this mean for accelerating energy transition in Southeast Asia? So the thing that I would put the greatest highlight on, and I'm really interested to hear the perspectives of the panelists and the discussion later on. The single most important thing from my point of view is the trajectory towards the next generation of NDCs. So emissions targets in particular for the year 2035. And I would put to you that the opportunity here for Southeast Asia is to actually put forward stronger nationally determined contributions, stronger emissions targets, not as necessarily hard commitments, but as ambitious pledges. The Paris Agreement was always designed in a way that encourages greater ambition without punitive elements that might discourage that ambition. Now, why might one want to do that from a national interest point of view? Well, first of all, finance will be unlocked through more ambitious commitments, of course, and that's both public finance through the different channels listed here on the slides, as well as private finance. Increasingly, large private finance providers, including pension funds, private equity, and so forth, are very conscious of the need for their investments to be long-term climate change compatible, both with regard to physical risks from climate change, as well as carbon risks. So increasingly, you're finding it easier to attract private finance, really for anything, if you have a strong, sensible, and credible climate commitment. All of this also enables a focus on the long term, and I would argue that it pays for any country to put strong emphasis on the end point, on the long term, and that's zero emissions energy systems, usually dominated by renewables in highly electrified national energy systems. And so the contrast to that is, of course, continuing to rely on fossil fuels. A very strongly rising topic, and I'll end on that, is to seek opportunities for economic advantage for individual countries in that net zero transition, right? And what you may mean by that is greater local energy production. So any fossil fuel importers will be looking towards greater economic activity at home, because you're going to be replacing those fossil fuel imports with domestically generated energy, as well as, of course, obviously, new industrial opportunities and the opportunity for developing countries in particular to leapfrog into strong positions in new industries, in processing, mining, and even manufacturing, as we're seeing in some Southeast Asian countries. Thank you very much, and I very much look forward to the panelists' contributions and the discussion.
Thank you so much, Frank. And to all the participants, if you have questions to Frank, just type it in, and then we can go through that after the panelist discussion. So for this first panel, we have three panelists. I shouldn't say speakers, because none will be doing any presentation. So the first one, we have Mr. Katro Romandi, who is currently the coordinator for Energy Conservation Program at the Directorate of Energy Conservation at the Ministry of Energy and Mineral Resources here in Indonesia. Good morning, Pak Katro, and thank you for having your time at the very last minute, because initially we plan to have Mr. Gigi Udiatmo, but unfortunately at the very last minute, Mr. Gigi couldn't join us. And the second one, we also have Dr. Michael Sinocruz, who is the Director for Energy Policy and Planning Bureau in the Philippines. Good morning, Dr. Michael Sinocruz. And the third one, we also have our colleague from Vietnam, Dr. Nguyen Xuan Huy, who is the Associate Professor at the Ho Chi Minh University of Technology in Vietnam. And to all the panelists, I think we already heard what Professor Frank Yotso presented earlier as introduction to our session. And it is also aligned to what happened in the region, because right now we know that the three countries also are in the process to transitioning, right, their energy from, let's say, fossil-based one to something that is lower in emission, which is part of the energy transition also. And as already mentioned earlier, also that there are two countries that already get support through the Just Energy Transition Partnership, which is Indonesia and Vietnam. However, the three countries are doing so even without support. I'm sure that you are still, preparing yourself to do it as well. So, and this is aligned to what the Professor Jotso mentioned earlier, that now I think one of the biggest challenges is to preparing ourselves for the next NDC. And I think it's not only for NDC, but even way further in the future, we have to work on the net zero emission and decarbonization also. So for each of you, I have two questions to start with. The first one is how far, you see your countries right now in that process, since, let's say, since Paris, since Glasgow, since last year. Where are you now in the process of transitioning your energy from fossil base to something that is low carbon or even much better renewable and no emission, right? And the second one, if we are talking about transitioning, then it means that we move from one point to another point that may affect some, players or some stakeholders. So how each of your countries strategize yourself in preparing for the just part of it. So we are talking about just energy transition. So how do you see it? So I think if I may, I can start with Dr. Michael Sino Cruz. How is it with the Philippines? And then I will then move to Pak Katro and then Dr. Nguyen. So please, Dr. Michael Sino Cruz, how is it with Vietnam? With the Philippines. Sorry.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Cookie, and then good morning to our fellow panelists here. So, as regards the Philippine position or the status of our energy transition here in the Philippines, we have already set a higher RE share in our Philippine Energy Plan. Even under the reference scenario, we set a target of 50% share of renewable energy by 2040 up to 2050. But under the clean energy scenario right now, we are targeting a much higher share, more than 50%. Likewise, we have existing coal moratorium, so meaning there will be no more greenfield coal power plants to be built. And we are also part of the accelerate coal transition. However, we are not on the retirement per se of the coal power plants, but rather repurposing of the coal power plants to clean fuel. Why? Because we can avoid additional costs, because if we're going to retire this coal without repurposing these facilities, what will happen to the support facilities like the switchyard, the transmission line? So if you're going to convert this to repurpose this coal power plants to other clean fuels, so we will not anymore build the switchyard, we will not anymore build the transmission line. So we can reduce the cost of building of repurposing these power plants. Aside from the RE, we also have now a law on the electric vehicle. We do have a roadmap, and we're targeting to have 50% of our road transport running on electricity by 2040 onwards. That's our aspirational target to have 50% of our road transport running using electricity, and as well as on energy efficiency. So we have several mechanisms right now, policies in place to be able for us to promote further the energy efficiency. And our focus right now is to develop our offshore wind, because based on the study conducted by World Bank, we do have significant potential resource for offshore wind. So we are now assessing the support facilities for us to move forward to have to introduce offshore wind to be targeted by 2028. And aside from the port facilities to be also expanded, we need to put in place the required transmission facilities for this. And currently we are finalizing, we are drafting the policy framework for the hydrogen and its derivatives, because we need also these emerging technologies to be part of our mix later on, thereby diversifying our energy mix, clean energy mix. With that, thank you, Ms. Cookie.
Sorry, if I may, there is another question that you may want to respond also on the just part of it. So how are you strategizing in the Philippines?
Okay, right now the just transition. So you're correct. We have already started our work on the how to right skilling, upskilling those that will be affected by the transition. We have already. This is a whole of government approach in the Philippines. So our position right now is to push for the international accreditation for the green jobs, and we will be proposing this during the COP28. We'll be submitting a concept note on this on the international accreditation for the green jobs. And not only the workers that will be affected by the transition, even the micro enterprises, the host communities, wherein we do have coal power plants and coal mining, among others. This should also be supported as well, not only the workers. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and I think it's really clear on where you are and how you plan for the future for energy transition. And now I move to Pak Katro then. How is it in Indonesia? And we know that Indonesia already part of this Just Energy Transition Partnership. So where are we with and also beyond the JETP? I think because as I understand it, JETP is, like, if I can say, only 20 billion, right? While I'm sure that everyone knows that the cost or the investment needed is way beyond it. So Pak Katro, if you can share with us also on how it is in Indonesia, including the just part of it, Pak. Thank you.
Thank you, Kuki, and very good morning to all. And thank you also for the invitation for UNOP and National University. I would like to talk on behalf of my director, Dr. Gigi, who could not attend. So I will start with the current condition of renewable energy mix in the country. So renewable energy, we only reach 12.5%. So still majority coming from coal-based, natural gas, and also oil. So if we talk about the total installed power generation capacity, still again around 85% coming from fossil generators, and renewables generators only 12.6%, or 50%, or around 12.6 gigawatt. It means that we have more strategic approach, implementative or doable regulations to be facilitated by our stakeholders. So if we talk about COP27, COP28, the coming COP, we, Indonesia, already committed to reduce greenhouse gas emissions 2030. Under enhanced national determined contributions, the energy sector will contribute around 358 million tons, while again, the greenhouse gas emissions reduction at the moment, the achievement still around 118 million tons of CO2. So we still have way to go to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. So the strategies will be coming from the implementations of energy efficiency, the development of renewable energy, again, clean energy power generation. We do have abundant resource of biofuel, so we will start with the low carbon fuels for transport sectors and other activities for mining industries. We have mining reclamations, and this is also one of the best our strategy to mitigate the climate action. So if we jump to the Just Energy Transition Partnership, is one of the product coming from the COP27. If we all already know that we do have SSIP, some LSTake implementation plan, and part of the implementation plan, there is an energy negotiation, which is just energy transition partnership, is a one of a way to collaborate, or one of the way to cooperate amongst countries. So Indonesia, together with the International Partner Group, so-called IPG, we do have international agreement on the G20 summit last year, and the implementation, as Bu Fuki already mentioned, around 20 billion is not really huge actually, and some of them are most likely are loans, not a grant. So at the moment, with the JP Secretariat, currently the government of Indonesia still look the best options, the best strategy by using the priority scale to find the best energy transition pathways. So by doing this development of a comprehensive investment policy and plan, so-called CIP, we do have like a portfolio program, as well as financing and also implementation plans. But still in the progress, we do have cooperative and quite intensive discussions with the IPG member countries. And the last we had is the negotiations round on the 20th of September at New York. But if I would like to say, just to give an update, that one of the key issues is how to finance all projects. So the goal right now is how to carbon transactions or carbon trading is one of the issues we can have right now, how to control, how to finance. And the President of Indonesia officially launched the Indonesian Carbon Exchange on the 26th September 2023. And we do have now carbon market, and there are 4 IDX carbon trading mechanism: auction, regular trading, negotiated trading, and also marketplace. So we do have also collaboration closely with the Ministry of Environmental and Forestry, and to get these carbon units, or to avoid the double counting is happening in the country. So again, if we talk about how to, as mentioned by Prof. Frank Yotso, we do have political decisions to get this ambition. So how to finance is one of the focus on by the government. So we try to talk with the Minister of Finance also, how to create the best solution mechanism to do the energy transition. And we do have, will be coming soon, the regulation coming from the Minister of Finance related with the energy transition mechanism. So I will stop there. We'll give it back to you. Thank you for the time.
Thank you, Pak Katro. And on the just part, then it will be similar to what happened in the Philippines, is it?
It's just energy transition, yeah, Bu Kuki, yeah?
Yeah.
What do you mean? So we do have probably most likely 80% out of it fossil based. So if we do the transition energy, so we will ask for about the technology transfer, capacity building, how to change, how to shift from the basic local workers coming from fossil based to learn new, to be adaptive for the new or renewable energy business value chain. So we will have the capacity building programs. We will have work closely with institutions, business entities to develop the necessary skills and knowledge to implement so-called climate resilient sustainable energy practice.
All right. Thank you, Pak Katro. And now I would like to invite Dr. Nguyen Xuan Huy on how it is in Vietnam, because I know that Vietnam also already got the JETP. I know whether it's also part of the process and also on the just part of the transition itself. So please, Dr. Huy.
Let me share with you after listening to ideas by Mr. Wastro from Indonesia and Mr. Michael from the Philippines. I would emphasize that from fossil fuels to the sustainable energy, especially renewable energy, and following to what our government has done with the commitment before international community. That commitment, I think, is sufficient. And from the country, the government already issued the law, the decree by the government, and circular for the law implementation, which require different ministry and agency to participate. That reflect that we have sufficient legal framework. Following to my study, I see that the carbon emissions in Vietnam now is still very low compared to the world. Now in Vietnam, it is about 0.58% of the carbon emission. Compared to the Philippines, it is still lower than Vietnam. It is 0.35. And Indonesia, the emission is about 1.48%. So that is the data I got from AIR. So in comparison with such information, the carbon emission per capita in 2020 in Vietnam is about 3.27 per head. Indonesia is 2.09. So compared to the world now, the carbon emission of our Southeast Asian country, it is lower than the average level in the world. So in the world is 4.76 ton per head. So now in China, it is high, and in the US, it's about 13-14%, and in the European country, it's still quite high for the emission. So in the context that Vietnam, Philippines, and Indonesia, we have a large room of carbon for our country's transition. Though the Vietnam's carbon emission is low, the determination of the government of Vietnam for the development of the clean energy since 2017 so far, the development of renewable energy in our country is very strong. And the current issued like decision number 89 by the Prime Minister regarding the fix of the wind power's price compared to the rate in 2017, or the feed price of the solar power price, reflects that the renewable energy has been supported and subsidies a little bit by the government. Following to the 2023, the power generation regulatory center, the capacity of short capacity reached 80,000 or it is about 80 gigawatt. So it's compared to other countries in the world, the install capacity of Vietnam is highest in Southeast Asia, even higher than in Indonesia. I don't remember exactly. In Indonesia, it's about 76 gigawatt. In Vietnam, we have 80 gigawatt. So in 80 gigawatt, the proportion of the renewable energies short-term power is about 20%. That the commercial power generated from renewable energy occupies by 12 to 15%. Almost from wind powers, the wind power occupied by 6.27%. Solar is about 21%, and other like biomass is about 0.5%. So in a nutshell, the development of renewable energy in Vietnam has been booming recently. That reflects the government and the private sector and the people have a strong determination to do energy transition. And I think at present, that's about 6,000 megawatt of renewable energy is under transition. So on the 6th October this year, 2023, we have over 1,200 megawatt integrated into the national grid. So it's about 25%. So at this moment, the development of the renewable energy in Vietnam still on track of positive development. So the plan for the renewable energy development by 2030, following to the PDP-8 just adopted in May, it reflects that by 2030, the source installed energy is about 140 megawatt. So the development of renewable energy in such context is huge, of course, in such a transition. The current development and booming of the renewable energy still remains some problem. It is the bottlenecks in integration or connection of the renewable energy to the national grid, including the difficulty for the investor to get return in their renewable energy investment project. So by 2030, from now to 2030, the development of offshore wind power project in Vietnam, the government would increase about 6 gigawatt, 3 in the north and 3 in the south. So the development of the offshore wind power projects, if it increase the consumption or the carbon emission in Vietnam, in power sector, it is about 69% of the emission. So the development of the wind powers will help Vietnam reach the net zero target faster. The difficulties I would like to emphasize in the offshore wind power project is we do not have the ocean spatial planning. But recently, on the 29th September, under the government effort, the government has just adopted the profiles of the national power space plan from now to 2030. So I think in November, if it is adopted by the National Assembly or Parliament, so by the end of this year, the power special plan, if adopted, so next year it would be open for the spatial planning in the ocean of Vietnam, that we can reach the target.
Dr. Hui, my sincere apology. We are kind of running off time, and we have quite a number of questions in the Q&A also. So if you don't mind, Dr. Hui, maybe you can summarize, and also on the just part, how is it that you or Vietnam is preparing itself? So maybe for another minute, if you don't mind.
Yeah, thank you. Let me summarize. You see, Vietnam is on track of renewable energy with a very strong determination, and we will reach the target by 2030 with the renewable energy target. Now the government identified and adopted shortly the ocean special planning, that we could have like more wind powers, offshore wind powers project to be constructed. And another thing is we need international funding to collaborate with the government funding to develop the offshore wind power project, and especially construction, development, manufacturing of the equipment for the offshore wind power project to be implemented. Another thing is also training to, and of course, development of the national grid system to be improved is also what we need. And we thanks for your listening.
Thank you so much, and my sincere apology for cutting short your response. Ladies and gentlemen, all colleagues here, we unfortunately we are running out of time, but however, to all the panelists as well as Professor Jotso, there are quite a number of questions in Q&A box. So please, if you don't mind to respond directly to it, but I will have one questions from there that might be answered by our panelists here, and maybe if Professor Jotso would like to add also. This is a question from Julius Relampagos from the Department of Economics, University of San Carlos. The question is to any of you, whoever that would like to respond to it. While we know that individual countries are already pursue their own energy transition pathway, is there or has there been an intergovernmental collaboration or consultation among these three countries to address this issue? Maybe we can also hear later on from Pak Benny in the context of ASEAN, but at least for these three countries, is there any consultation or collaboration among the three? And if there is any, then on which aspect? So I can start with whoever that would like to start. Maybe, I don't know, Dr. Michael Sinocruz, if you want to respond to this first.
Okay, thank you, Cookie. With regard to this question, so there's an initiative under ASEAN, under ACE. It's not only Indonesia, Philippines, and Vietnam, but we do have a program, cooperation on energy transition under the ASEAN Band of Action for Energy Cooperation. So there are other cooperation framework, like for instance the IPEF, wherein we are also looking at this energy transition as well. And with regard to I think Philippines, Indonesia, Philippines, and Vietnam are all part of the ETT as well as the ADB plan on accelerating coal transition. So though we have not done any consultations with each other, but the program itself by the ADB. So somehow we can learn from the experiences of Indonesia and Vietnam as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Michael Sinocruz. Pak Katro, or maybe Dr. Hui, if you know something to add to what Dr. Sino Cruz mentioned earlier, please?
Yeah, if I may, to add what been said by Dr. Mike. Actually, 1.5 months ago, we do have Just Energy Transition Dialogue. It was held in Philippines, and it was worked closely under the GIZ program. And we met 4 countries, actually, Philippines, Indonesia, Vietnam, and also Thailand. We do have this kind of collaboration. What we had talked about during the Just Energy Transition dialogue at the time, we talk about how each country, because we do have different expectations among countries in the Southeast Asia region. But what we had talked about strongly related to the financial support, technology transfer, and how to have the capacity building, and how to report and how to monitor related to the greenhouse gas emissions reduction, how to climate adaptation measures, the impact of the energy transitions, and also the most important one is the climate finance transparency, and also how to have the just transition shifting from fossil-based to renewable. So this kind of dialogue is really strengthen us, and we do have conclusions among the 4 countries. I think that's also the big advantages in doing the Just Energy Transition Dialogue supported by the GIZ. Thank you.
Thank you, Pak Katro. And Dr. Hui, if you want to add something on this, on the collaboration, the regional one.
You see, at present, why I'd like to emphasize about Vietnamese experiences. The points of awareness is important. You see, from Hanoi and Ho Chi Minh City, we often organize event twice a week, almost twice a week, organization of the event with the engagement between government and the stakeholder to understand for the possible policy to be flexible, to be adaptable to the new context. So that is important for the possible mechanism to be developed with the engagement of the stakeholder. We have the engagement from the banking sectors, on technical, engineering, etc. So it's very important. For regional cooperation, like in Indonesia and the Philippines, I know they have experiences. Even in Vietnam, I know some company in Vietnam from wind power. They go to Indonesia and the Philippines. They go there to support and collaborate with them, with partner company for the project development. So that reflects the learning process of from Indonesia, like in Central Sumatra, Iceland. There are many partners there. They are doing renewable energy, and we are changing. In November this year, we invite experts from Indonesia to Vietnam. We share the model, we share the story on how we could collaborate with each other. That I think is very important for increasing awareness ourselves. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. Thank you to all the panelists. And as I mentioned, we are running out of time, and so sorry, but I think it was an interesting information that we got from all the panelists, as well as, of course, our keynote from Frank. But maybe, Frank, if you want to add on the last question, if you are aware of any regional cooperation, collaboration, conversation related to the energy transition.
Well, thank you very much. Look, I do not want to take more time on this other than to say there's great opportunity, of course, in international coordination in Southeast Asia on the energy transition and climate change more generally. And of course, there are bilateral and multilateral connections here, but I think it's clear that very fruitfully. A lot more could be done, and perhaps ASEAN is in fact a useful framework for that, and also noting, of course, the plans for a special ASEAN summit early in 2024, in which climate and energy would no doubt play an important role. I will go through those questions online and answer the relevant ones. Thank you for one commentator who very importantly pointed out the resolution to phase out inefficient fossil fuel subsidies. I forgot to mention that in my talk, very important. Thank you again.
Thank you so much, Frank, and thank you again to all the panelists, and thank you for all the participants also for staying with us. And I would like now to hand it back to Tarek. So Tarek, you have the floor. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Bu Kuki, and thanks also to all the panelists and speakers. That was a really excellent session there. And actually, it leads very nicely into our next session. So session 2, we're now going to talk about the next 7 years and how, in particular, regional cooperation can build on and extend the previous successes that we've had in Southeast Asia. I think as we sit here in this halfway between our seminar, halfway on the way to 2030 between Paris, just want to reflect a little bit where we are. I happen to be a very big football fan, and my team, Liverpool, often goes behind in their first half. So 6 of the last 8 games they've played, they've gone down and they've had to come back and win from being behind at halftime. That's, I think, where we are in Southeast Asia. We've had good progress, we've had some success, but we are behind the game in terms of what we need to achieve to realize the ambition of Paris, as Frank showed in that early graph in his opening presentation. We need to work out what we've been doing well and what we can extend further and accelerate and expand and strengthen, so that in the second half we do more of those things and come back and perform better than we have been doing in the first half. So to do that, I think what we are in very safe hands to pass over to our first speaker here, our speaker for session 2, which is Benny Suryadi. Benny, I think many of you will know, he's from the ASEAN Center for Energy, and he's a professional with more than 13 years of experience in managing energy and climate change programs, supporting governments in Southeast Asia, including with ASEAN. He's currently leading energy partnerships with the US, Russia, China, India, Norway, and international development agencies. And they oversee a vast multi-million-dollar portfolio of projects under his leadership there. So, Benny, I'll pass to you now for your keynote presentation on ASEAN energy transition progress against its targets and the role of energy cooperation.
Thank you very much, Mr. Tarek Katelsen, the Managing Director of the AMBERES. Good morning to all honorable speakers and panelists, distinguished participants, and all of you for joining this morning. Warm greeting from Jakarta, Indonesia. It's an honor for me to virtually join with you all this morning in this important pre-COP28 policy dialogue. And as mentioned, I would like to also thank the EDP and all of the organizing committee for inviting me to briefly share about the ASEAN energy transition progress against our regional energy target, and also how regional cooperation play a role in advancing the energy transition. A little bit of introduction, as mentioned by our host. I'm working for the ASEAN Center for Energy. It is an intergovernmental organization that represents the interests of the 10 ASEAN member states on the energy cooperation. As a catalyst, as a knowledge hub, and as a think tank for the 10 Ministry of Energy from the 10 ASEAN member states, we support the countries in reviewing and implementing various energy cooperation activity under the APEC, as well as support the engagement with various dialogue partner and international organizations. So what is APEC itself? Mr. Sinokru from Philippines mentioned is earlier about the APAC, the ASEAN Plan of Action for the Energy Cooperation. APAC is a series of the guiding policy documents to support the implementation of the ASEAN Multilateral Energy Cooperation to advance regional integration and connectivity goals. It serves as a blueprint for better energy cooperation under 7 program areas in achieving the goal of the ASEAN Economic Community pillar of the ASEAN community. Reflecting the principle of the adopting all fuels policy, the 7 program areas of the APAC cover the whole perspective of energy, be it on the energy efficiency or renewable energy, to name a few. The current version covers the period of 2021 to 2025 with a theme of enhancing energy connectivity and market integration in ASEAN to achieve the energy security, achieve energy accessibility, affordability, and sustainability for all. And it equipped with the sub-theme of the accelerating energy transition and strengthening energy resilience through greater innovation and cooperation. Speaking more on the energy transition in the region, it's mentioned earlier many times. We may see the progress from the regional effort in bringing more renewable energy into its energy mix and into its power mix. Under the APAC, the regional blueprint on energy cooperation, ASEAN aspires to increase the share of renewable energy to 23% in the total primary energy supply, or TPES, and 35% in installed power capacity by 2025. Referring to the figure on your left, on your screen, 2021 actual data, the share of renewable energy in ASEAN energy mix was at 14.4%. So this is quite a significant 8.6% gap from our 23% target in 2025. Of course, it's not a success story that we could put out so far. But in the power sectors, ASEAN is on track to reach beyond its regional target of 35% of renewable energy in the installed power capacity in 2025. Referring to the figure on your right screen, 2021 data, ASEAN has already at 33.6% of renewable energy in its total regional installed capacity. And with the various green commitment as reflected in the various new power development plan of the several ASEAN member states, Philippines, Indonesia, including recently Malaysia, with its national energy transition strategy, we are expecting to shoot 38% in 2025. So it's far above the regional target. But let's talk more about the reality. So based on the database in our ASEAN Power Updates, in 2020, when the world was collapsing due to the COVID-19 pandemic, ASEAN was actually making a record, powered by the skyrocketing solar growth in Vietnam and significant addition of hydropower in Laos. 82% of the total 22 gigawatt of the new installed capacity was renewable. So this was in 2020. But then the last 2 years were a different story. More than anything else combined, as you can see in the figure on the right, cumulatively, there was a total of more than 15 gigawatt of the coal-fired power plants added to the system. ASEAN, in these 2 years, installed less renewable energy compared to what the region did only in 2020 alone. So, big question mark, why? Why did this happen? Or is this a reverse direction for happening in the ASEAN region? We can't escape from the reality that the challenge that the world is experiencing in these 2 years making everyone, including us, the 10 ASEAN member states, have to realign our strategy. The continuous impact of the COVID-19 pandemic, the Russian-Ukraine war, the tension on the geopolitical of energy security and economic recovery all blended and have caused the realignment. But it's a realignment on the strategy, not in the direction, because we all know and we agree already on our direction. Our goal, as stipulated in the regional blueprint that I mentioned earlier, the APAC, are to achieve the energy security, energy accessibility, energy affordability, and sustainability for all. But one crucial thing that we can't ignore is the bottleneck of the financing. I noticed there's a lot of questions earlier in the Q&A previous session raised this kind of issue. To reach the 23% target, ASEAN will need to attract investment of 27 to 30 billion of US dollar in renewable energy generation in infrastructure every year from 2016 to 2025 until 2030, or a total of the 290 billion US dollar are required. However, historically, on average, only a quarter of the amount was invested. Such limited investment in renewable will make reaching ASEAN target of the 23% renewables difficult by 2025 onward. We recognize that the renewable energy investment in the ASEAN member states are hindered by the policy inconsistency. We hear that a lot, financial barrier, and the lack of a robust project pipeline. Some states from the studies also mentioned the project preparation facility can help resolve various technical, financial, and legal challenges in preparing clean energy projects, but there's also a lot of question on the effectiveness. But it is also what is crucial to be highlighted is the required support from the international community to fill the investment gap. Private investment has been the main driver behind the ASEAN renewable energy investment so far, but still significant gaps needed to be filled. We have heard the commitment from the developed country in the last few COPs, but still a lot of questions are raised. Where is the money? And it's also mentioned earlier, being raised in how the regional effort is being put in place to escalate the energy transition in the region. We do recognize in today's challenge of the energy transition, there is no single country that could face it alone, including us in this region. That's why 10 ASEAN member states join force to escalate the regional energy transition process, but is in line with their national interest and priority. So we no longer see and plan as individual countries, but already trying to integrate it with the plan in the neighboring countries. But of course, more is needed. This is why our institution, the ASEAN Center for Energy, actively act as the catalyst and build various regional partnerships. A regional approach or a coordinated energy cooperation that considers country-specific circumstances and characteristic is always the priority of regional effort to accelerate the energy transition. Mentioned earlier, beyond this, from the scheme that we have, specifically on the financing, a mechanism such as the energy transition mechanism or the just energy transition partnership is very crucial for the region. But it has to be recognized to be reflective on the country's specific circumstances. This will be my last slide. I don't think I have a time to go into detail, but this is one of the latest strategy being released by the ASEAN strategy for the carbon neutrality. A bold commitment has been made, and the support from the international community is definitely crucial. As ASEAN will present this at the coming COP, I do hope that it will be welcomed by the global community and that their commitment to providing green financing is translated into concrete dollar. With this, I end my presentation. Thank you very much for listening and looking forward to engaging and listening to the next panel discussion. Over to you, Mr. Tarek. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Pak Benny. That was an inspiring halftime talk. A coach as good as Jurgen Klopp, I think you are, Pak Benny. I think what you highlighted there in terms of 82% of new installed capacity in the years prior to COVID in the power sector coming from renewables shows us that we can do it. That your question posed about what happened after COVID and the return to coal is an interesting one. I think we can pick up with our panelists. And also that point about the bottlenecking on financing. And I think that's a really important point when we think about the regional perspective here. So without further ado, let us bring on board some esteemed colleagues to chew over your presentation with. And I'm very pleased to invite three excellent panelists. So we have first Ms. Chang Nguyen. She is the Southeast Asia lead at Climate Work Center, which is an independent not-for-profit think tank under Monash University. Her team works with stakeholders in Australia and Southeast Asia to scale up climate ambitions across areas, including decarbonisation pathways, climate finance, and just transition. And for those of you who've joined previous energy transition roundtables, that positioning of being between Australia and Southeast Asia is a really important one, because there has been lots we've seen in the previous roundtables that we can learn and share from Australia to Southeast Asia and vice versa. Our second panelist is Mr. Sasha Opwa. He is a dedicated professional serving as a project director for Clean, Affordable and Secure Energy for Southeast Asia, CASE program. And this is a comprehensive project funded by the German government spanning 7 years. And they've been really active in not only in the regional space, but also in this space about how to support developing countries advance their energy transition ambitions. And they've been very effective in that space. And we're really pleased to have Sasha join us today. And last but not least, from our own energy transition program, we have Ms. Maria Fritzi Virgil. Fritzi is the Energy Transition Partnership Philippines Country Program Coordinator, and in the ETP, she's running the ETP program in the Philippines, focusing on the energy efficiency window, demand-side management activities, and a range of other activities. She herself has over 10 years of experience working on clean energy policies, financing, capacity building, and energy access, including with ADB, UNDP, USAID, and the DREAMS project. So welcome to our three panelists. It's really a big pleasure to have you all here with us. And if I may now, if we can just take 2 minutes each, and I will stress that we all stick to 2 minutes because we are a bit behind schedule. I'll invite each of you to just to reflect on that presentation and see what are those things that we're doing regionally or nationally that are really successful in advancing the energy transition. What do you feel really optimistic about, and which of the countries are showing great promise to reach the greatest promise to reach the Paris agreement? So first to you, Ms. Chang.
Thanks, Tarek, and good morning and good afternoon, everyone. And thanks, Park Benny, for sharing the keynote speech and about the, especially about the newly launched ASEAN strategy for carbon neutrality. As an organization that has been working very closely in the region on green investment, industrial strategies, and decarbonization pathway in the region. We really welcome especially the two first key outcomes for the strategy, which is first is boosting regional green industries, and secondly, the enabling ASEAN interoperability. And I believe that these are very critical for decarbonization efforts in the region. I think also from Park Benny's presentation, it's very glad to see that there are a lot of reasons for us to be optimistic about the energy transition efforts in the region. If we look back to the last 10 years in the region, along the line, some of the key metrics, target settings, renewable energy uptake, and also climate financing flow to Southeast Asia, there has been considerable progress. Of course, there are a lot of challenges and barriers to overcome in Southeast Asia and also in globally as well. But I see a lot of reasons to be optimistic about. I would say Singapore, for the last 12 months, since the country committed to net zero target by 2050, has been playing a really instrumental role in mobilizing green financing to the region, especially climate private financing. And also they has been very active in establish some of the important cross-border electricity trading initiatives in the region. But I mean, obviously, Singapore cannot go to net zero target without a lot of the rest of Southeast Asia. So I would be hopeful that all countries in the region would reach the finish lines together at the same time. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Ms. Chang. And Mr. Sasha, I pass to you for a few remarks there.
Yeah, thanks, Tarek, and thanks to our friends from ETP for having me. Also, thanks to Mas Benny for the presentation. I think the fact alone that we can have this discussion about RE and where we are standing right now, it's great compared to some years ago that there is actually this discussion. I think it also gives hope that the installed capacity that Benny shared is actually very close to the target set for 25. And the surge in RE investments in Vietnam, I think they do showcase that it can happen, and yeah, that it is possible. I also think it's interesting and great that in the sphere of energy and talking with these very important stakeholders, it's interesting and great to see that the NDC commit, or the NDCs, especially the carbon neutrality targets set by all of these countries, are the guiding principle. So really sort of the spillover from the COP negotiations into also this discussion around energy transition. I think that's a great sign. And were we to talk 4 or 5 years ago, I guess that would have been too ambitious for many to believe. And here we are, but we do have these conversations now.
Thanks very much, Sasha. And last but not least, Ms. Fritzi, over to you.
Thanks, Derek. Thank you also to Pak Benny for that comprehensive update on the progress of the ASEAN in energy transition. So maybe reflecting on that presentation, I have 3 maybe major points. The first is on financing, and I think Ms. Chang also mentioned this, that while there are huge investment flows into the region, there's still a huge gap to achieve where we want to be. And it seems that the issue is beyond really availability of funds, but having to access those funds as well, and also addressing persisting risks. So across the region, maybe speaking specifically on where ETP is working on Indonesia, Vietnam, and the Philippines, there are still transmission risks, curtailment risk. There are also pre-development risk, maybe related to permitting or land use, and also some market risks involved or that may dampen investors' interest, private sector interest. And jumping off from that risk is my second point on the role of maybe policy making. We have policymakers here in this dialogue, and they have been pushing for creating a more enabling ecosystem for investments to come in. There are various market mechanisms that different governments are adopting. We have FIT, we have in the Philippines, we have the renewable portfolio standards, the obligation, and also, again, speaking from the Philippines, we did complete 2 rounds of energy auctions, opening the market for renewables, about 13 gigawatts. And that creates a strong signal for a demand for renewables. And this could, encourage more investment, encourage more capital to come in the region. But maybe my third point would be on energy efficiency and conservation. I think Pak Benny also mentioned the importance of energy efficiency, and we at ETP we promote and we believe that energy efficiency is the least cost option for energy transition. And because we believe in it so much, we opened the grant facility. We call it the Energy Efficiency Innovation Window. This is a grant facility to test ideas on energy efficiency. And we were looking for innovation, we were looking for new things, but when we get these proposals, it seems that most of the solutions are not new anymore. These are proven, technically proven, economically viable. And while these are economically viable solutions, there seems to be limited adoption across the region. And there are persisting perceived risk on energy efficiency. The financing is more difficult. Also, the market is a little bit more uncertain. So there are a lot of opportunities for energy efficiency, not just for local action, but also for harmonization across the region and for cooperation. So I'll stop there. Thank you.
Great, thanks a lot, Fritzi. We got a couple of questions relating to the grid and transmission. So let me start with a few questions to all panelists, and starting first with Pak Benny. So a number of commentators are also starting to recognize that an ASEAN grid is central to unlocking some of the barriers to accelerating renewable energy in Southeast Asia. So for example, there is one group of the Atlantic Council for Global Energy Center who says that to ensure a steady flow of capital, regulators must develop a transmission and distribution infrastructure that supports both national as well as a regional approach. With time ticking on the Paris Agreement, how important is an ASEAN grid to make substantive progress on Paris? So that's to Pak Benny. Pak Benny, are you still with us? Okay. Well, I'm not sure if Pak Benny is still there, but if he's not there, can I ask perhaps a similar question, or the similar question to Mr. Opwa, because we know, for example, GIZ's CASE program has been focused on grid transformation in your support to Southeast Asian governments. So if thinking from that regional perspective as well, what do you see as some of the market and technical barriers preventing this, and can we solve them in the timescale available with Paris?
Yeah, thanks, Tarek. And it's a shame that Benny isn't here to take it, because usually that's his hard project or hard initiative. And for reference, as CASE, the project I'm heading, we're working together with ETP and ACE on an initiative in the context of the ASEAN Power Grid, so-called ASEAN Power Grid Advancement Program, or APGAP in short. And just some weeks ago, we sealed the deal and signed an MOU at AMEM, at this ASEAN Ministers on Energy meeting. And also at that meeting, it was the chairman from Indonesia, I believe, who then concluded the meeting by saying, or the very first thing that he actually said and concluded was, no transition without transmission, no security without interconnectivity, and no sustainability without synergy. And I found it striking that that was the very first thing he put his fingers on, or pointed towards. I guess there would have been other energy issues, but that was the very first. And I do think it's great that they're elevating the profile and the emphasis on this ASEAN Power Grid issue. Of course, it's nothing new. So this idea has been around for more than 20 years ago. And actually, ACE has been at the helm of this, of conducting the very first set of studies. But it does feel as if the discussion on this grid do fall into the shadows a bit. I mean, it's necessary and important to focus on RE, because no transmission line will decrease carbon emissions. But at the same time, neglecting the issue will have its price. And it is important to advance more RE into the power mix at the same time, with advancing also the grid. And if there's one issue that does require regional cooperation, it is the ASEAN Power Grid. And I do have highest respect for this. I mean, I'm from Germany, and in the EU, it also took a very long time to get to a common power market. So I tip my hat to the colleagues working in Southeast Asia on this. But yeah, I do think it's great that there is more emphasis now also. And just also to to share that there's been this MOU on the APG signed by the ASEAN member states that was signed in 2017. So it's been a while ago, and of course back then the world was looking differently, so RE wasn't much of an issue, unfortunately then. This is fortunately different. There's been geopolitical issues that unfortunately are different now. So it is great that this MOU will be renewed later this year to also update in line of recent developments, and hopefully this can also then further push the question and issue of APG. And again, we're very happy to support this through our project as well as together with ETP.
Thanks very much, Jesse. Yes, I agree that it is a massive task and a big effort that commitment that people are making to bring the transmission issue into the transition discussions. One of the things about Southeast Asia or ASEAN that makes this even more challenging is the island nature of the member states. And for many ASEAN countries, islands make it difficult for even the national grids to be established effectively, and therefore also make it difficult to participate in a regional grid scenario. Nowhere perhaps is this more challenging than in Ms. Fritzi's home country of the Philippines. The Philippines has had three national grids that are up and running, but they're not interconnected. And you also have a greater opportunity for looking at the smaller scale distributed microgrids or smaller scale systems. So when you're thinking about ASEAN and regional cooperation and electrification in the Philippines, what scale really suits the island nation? Will the country benefit from going big and into the regional scale, or would you see opportunities also at the sub-regional, sub-national scale?
All right, thanks, Tarek. So the grid conversation is really very interesting, very hot in the Philippines right now. But the Philippines has 7,100 islands, and a lot of them are small and remote, and connecting them to the main grid would be really difficult and costly. So at that level, microgrids will play a very important role to deliver energy access. And these are high impact projects. And it's not that there's none. There's a lot of efforts on renewable energy microgrids, renewable energy hybrid microgrids. These are high impact projects delivering energy access immediately and directly to the people who need them. It opens up economic activities, tourism, facilitates governance, health, education. So the impact is very high to all these people who are used to, usually diesel generators. So at that level, microgrids will play an important role, and it's part of the just energy transition. We can't have just very big grids and leave this small pockets of islands, and then let them, wait for the grid to be connected. So we need those to be developed as well. But at the larger scale, I think Director Sino Cruz mentioned the drive for offshore wind. And the government is targeting to have the first offshore wind farms by 2028. They're looking at about 10 gigawatts. And if we unlock all of those potential, there is an opportunity to sell to a regional ASEAN grid. So there are still issues with interconnection, as you mentioned, and there's still inherent transmission issues. And we have looked at maybe at a regional study, the diagnostics on competitive arrangements for renewable energy procurement. And as Sasha also mentioned, the transmission is a critical component for energy transition. And the challenge is the timelines, really. When should we upgrade our transmission to make it ready for this large-scale renewable energy? It's not that the transmission network or system operators do not want to invest on transmission, but when should the investment come in? And that would require very strategic transmission planning, and maybe also at the larger scale, ASEAN scale planning, really, so that we just bridge that gap, reduce that timeline gap between having the transmission grids ready and the generation power plants ready as well. Thanks.
Great, thanks very much, Fritzi. Now, we had a couple of questions that have been asked in the Q&A box, and also in the registration, some people asked some questions for this session. So one of those questions I'm going to put to Ms. Chang, and I'm actually going to put two questions together, Chang, to save time. So the first question is how ASEAN as a region can push the energy transition agenda, especially in terms of attracting global support. So that was something that Frank mentioned in his presentation, that the need for developing countries to get support to advance their transition. And then the second part of that is, if we're successful in doing that, what are the top 3 priorities for assistance from kind of neighboring countries or from neighboring programs like EDP, Australia, and so on, to support the energy transition in the region?
Sure, thanks, Tarek. Yeah, so I think the climate financing, it's really important, as Benny mentioned in his presentation, refer to a significant financing gap of $95.5 billion from 2021 to 2030 in the region. So it's very important. And Prissy also mentioned that before. I think there has been a lot of discussion on scaling up financing at national level, like, for example, increasing the role of private sectors, innovative financial product, de-risking instruments, policy certainties, but much more efforts are needed to achieve the 1.5 aligned target, and the region can play a really significant role into it. I just want to highlight some of the key elements that ASEAN collaboration can help to mobilize that. First of all, I think a lot of initiative at regional level at the moment focus on increasing and accelerating renewable energy deployment or coal phase out, which are absolutely undoubtedly critical and very important. But one another critical element, according to a report by the IEA, the underdevelopment of the supply chains of clean technology also contributed significantly to increasing the cost of solar and wind in Southeast Asia. And I think Professor Franks also mentioned that in his speech as well. Our research demonstrated that Southeast Asia had really strong manufacturing capabilities and endowed with several critical minerals for energy transition. And with the enabling policy and combining competitive advantages, Southeast Asia can place themselves in a positions as a regional hub for green industrial investment, and by promoting local manufacturing and attracting foreign capital, this also in turn motivate countries to accelerate the energy transition through enabling policies in country. I think regional collaboration can play a very important role in this, because the ASEAN economic blueprint with the ASEAN Trade in Goods Agreement is one of the most successful legally binding instruments at regional level at the moment, and that can help to facilitate trade flows, expanding markets, removing trade market access barriers, and facilitate supply chain resilience in the region. The second thing that ASEAN can actually do is to align and harmonize the regulations and standards of some, and in some of the policy, for example, ASEAN taxonomy, which ASEAN has already been doing very well, aligning investment criteria, transition plan. The third thing is skill and knowledge exchange. Again, this is something ASEAN Secretariat has played a very important role. Wind skills play an important role in attracting investment at scale. So if ASEAN can become a green skill hub, therefore it's very good for attracting investment at scale to the region. And last but not least, we also need to remember that there's a very exciting instrument through ASEAN, which is the ASEAN Dialogue Partnership Mechanism, which at the moment 10 countries are official ASEAN dialogue partners and a lot of international collaboration and international development funding has come through that dialogue partnership. So I think that there's a lot of synergy for collaboration within ASEAN when it comes to mobilizing climate financing at scale. And that's linked to your question in terms of priorities for supporting Southeast Asia. I think there are a lot, but if minimizing to three, I would say, of course, as I said, capacity building and knowledge sharing. Other colleagues in the panels have mentioned a lot on electricity market reform, energy system planning. Those are the skills and knowledge sharing that needed for the region. And I know that there's a lot of lesson learned to share globally from Australia and from other countries. Financing, it's never enough. The financing gap is significant, so I cannot stress more the importance of it. And one of the most important aspect of the third one, and I think it's very important as well, as part of the Paris Agreement, low carbon technology transfer is very important to accelerate the energy transition. So I think it's very important to facilitate and accelerate this process. It has been reflected in the significant deviation between conditional and unconditional targets of different countries in Southeast Asia. I saw in the Q&A some questions related to it. So together with financing, clean technology transfer, it's very important to the region as well. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Ms. Chang. So I think we have a lot more questions. Unfortunately, we can't answer them live here because of the time. We are a bit behind schedule. We will, as a team, look into those questions and start to answer some of them in the chat box, and we can include those in the report of this workshop so that the answers will be inside there as well. So all questions will get answered. But I think our panelists and our speaker have given us a good game plan for the second half here. We know we've got to keep on rolling out a new renewable energy installed capacity, get back to that 80+% of all new capacity additions being renewables. That's going to be a chance for us to kick a goal in the second half. We know we need to develop our regional grid, and that statement that Sasha made about transmission is the essential for the transition. The point about supply chains was really important, and what Professor Frank called capitalize on the national economic advantage of the industry side that will be generated to support renewables. We had talk about skills and knowledge exchange and capacity building. Market reform we didn't talk about. There's a couple of questions on that, and maybe that'll have to be the Roundtable 24's topic if we get to Roundtable 24. And then, of course, the systems and the planning side. So that was all mentioned in there, and these are all important things for us to kind of take forward to COP to push for in the next 7 years. Okay, with that, I will close our second session on the next 7 years. I'm going to pass to my colleague, Ms. Luan, quickly, as she'll introduce the poll, the evaluation poll for this session, so just that you can see what will happen, and then we'll go to our closing remarks. Ms. Luan, over to you.
Thanks, Derek. Could we have the poll share? So, hi everyone. Before we come to the closing remark and the summary, we need your attention to spend 1 minute in our evaluation pool. We have 8 short questions. So we're looking forward to your feedback on our 23rd event of the ETB Roundtable series. And this is for our monitoring and evaluation purpose. So please take the 1 minute to answer the question. I can see the poll already started on your screen. If you have any difficulties in clicking the answer, please let us know in the chat box. And if anyone cannot complete the evaluation pool, we will follow up with you by email. Thank you.
Great. So while you're working that, I see that us panelists and organizers can't vote, so we can't give ourselves top marks for this session, but I look forward to the feedback from everybody. We really appreciate honest feedback here, and it helps us improve each session as we go. Okay, so as you're finishing your poll, I'd like to pass over now for our final session, which is the closing session. We were lucky to have Dr. Tang open the workshop for us, and now he's going to close for us as well. So I'll pass over to you, Dr. Tang, for a summary and closing remarks on the ANU side.
Thank you so much, Tarek, and all speakers and panelists and participants. A very interesting, very fruitful session, as I expected. I enjoyed and also learned a lot from the discussion. Now, let me try to summarize the key points that we have been discussing. In the first session, the speakers gave us the insights into the progress in each country, and I'm very pleased to see that the countries are making great progress despite a lot of challenges, as we know, given the rapid increase in energy and electricity demand and limited resources. But the efforts the government and the countries are taking are great. For example, raising the renewable energy targets, adjusting regulations to provide more favorable conditions for renewable energy. So that's very encouraging actions. Now, in the second session, we had very lively discussion about how to move forward, how to enhance the regional cooperation. And we have a lot of interesting ideas, recommendations on what we should work on together and how we should work on together. Now, let me try to summarize some key points. You mentioned about the existing cooperation such as ETP, CASE, ACE, JETP, and we all agree that we need to continue our efforts in renewable energy uptake, in fossil fuel phase out, as well as the energy efficiency. Now, how? I mean, it's when it comes to how, it's becoming more difficult. But we seem to agree that the way forward is to work together to increase the exchange of information, of good practice. You know, some countries have very good lessons to share with each other, and also work together to de-risk the investment for private sector involvement. We need more private sector engagement in order to have more finance needed for the energy transition, especially the investment in the ASEAN power grid, the signature project of the region, and it also requires a lot of more effort and resources. And there are many more ideas that I'm sure that you would like to discuss more, but perhaps because of the time limit, we cannot discuss in today's session, but for sure we will do it in the coming sessions. So thanks very much again, everyone, and each of you for
welcome, Jonio. We're just wrapping up.
For great contribution. I know that you need to switch to other meetings very soon. I know that there's some meetings are coming in. So without any more, I would like to thank you again. Thanks, Tarek, for great facilitation, and thanks everyone. And I look forward to seeing you again soon. Thank you. Back to you, Tarek.
Thanks very much, Dr. Tang. That was an excellent summary. And yeah, we pass now to our final closing remarks from Mr. Dimas Fauzi. Mr. Dimas, he's the program manager for the ETP, the Energy Transition Program, who is leading this program. So, Mr. Fauzi, over to you, please.
Thanks so much, Tarek. So yeah, first of all, I'd like to congratulate the team from ANU and MPRS and the consortium members for delivering such an excellent series of roundtable sessions on energy transition in Southeast Asia, including today's session I think it has proven that such dialogues have been able to trigger important discussions amongst the policy stakeholders in the region, and to also share the lessons and exchange and knowledge among each other. And also, I would like to thank all the panels and the participants for the contribution to the discussions today. And I believe that we have learned a lot from each and every one of you. And I would like to also reiterate some of the key points from today's discussion, as what Dr. Tang has also mentioned earlier today. So that I think when it comes to energy transition in the region, what we need is the system transformation, as Prof. Jotso mentioned earlier, that all actors in this policy environment should actually engage and participate in the process towards transitioning away from fossils. So that's I think quite important point that we need to acknowledge, that looking into this value chain perspective, then all the actors from the upstream to downstreams, they need to actually participate in the energy transition. And I've also been grateful to see that there are a lot of progress that have been made in Southeast Asian countries to realize the energy transition, especially through the deployment of renewable energy into the grids. However, we also need to reduce our dependency on fossil fuels, and it is something that needs to be done more in the region. And having the angle from the just transition is also important, because as I mentioned, that there's the value chain perspective in the energy transition. So from upstream to downstream, we need to understand what are the impacts of each of the actors working across this value chain, and how we can actually provide cushion for them. And what are needed, and how we can actually move forward from this is to have cross-sectoral collaboration across different ministries, across different institutes, at the national and also regional level. And hence, the regional collaboration is important to build capacity to exchange knowledge and experiences. Financial mechanism, as Dr. Tang mentioned, also becomes an important point. And I think what our country coordinator, Fritzi, mentioned on the competitive arrangements for renewable energy becomes kind of a good mechanism for the renewable energy investment to come forward in the region, and to reduce the risk of investing in the renewable energy sector. I think that's also another important point that I would like to highlight here. And finally, there is also the needs for the policy framework to be adjusted to promote renewable energy transition in the region, including the international support for the countries in Southeast Asia. And finally, I think I've heard a lot about the needs for the capacity building and then exchange of knowledge, having the platform to do that within the region. And ETP is committed to building the capacity of the policy stakeholders in Southeast Asia to promote energy transition. For example, through this project we call as the Energy Transition Roundtable, where we provide a lot of lessons for the policy stakeholders to actually advance the energy transition in each of the countries. And we of course put all of the materials in our website as well for you to access later on. And I'm also privileged to kind of help the development of the Just Coal Transition platform that ETP is currently incubating along with the World Bank. And it will provide the convening mechanism for the policy stakeholders in the region to strengthen the commitment towards the coal phase down, for example. So that's another angle of the capacity building that I would like to highlight here. Lastly, we are also developing more and more capacity building programs at the country and regional levels that are currently ongoing and under development. And for the next step, I hope that all the panels and participants, both from the governments and non-government actors, will be able to bring all the discussion points forward to your institution, to your work, and then try to realize what can be done from each of the actors after today's session. And for ETP and also ANU, Empress, and then all the partners, we are also having quite a number of events in the COP28 that we hope to be able to bring all of the discussions in this high-level policy dialogue. And yeah, I think for that, I will stop my speech here. And yeah, thanks so much for the opportunity.
Great. Thank you, Dimas. That was really great. And to hear that link there with the COP events you're organizing is fantastic as well. There will be a recording of this available for people, and we will be answering the questions in the workshop report. So apologies again, we didn't get to everybody's questions. And with those closing remarks from Dr. Tang and Mr. Fauzi, thank you very much all, and our session is closed.
Thank you, Tarek. Thank you, Dimas, and everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you and bye-bye.
Thank you,
Thanks,
everyone.
Cookie.
Thanks for your participation. See you.